It's just taking a long time for Nintendo to see that their future exists off their own hardware. A long time. 4 dots and one of those smiley faces with the hyphen for a nose in the middle, which is the sign of a psychopath. And that kind of goes to show exactly what's going on here, right? It's literally just, oh, well.
Which is the sign of a psychopath. I like Mike. He's always very blunt. Anticipated revenues in millions. So they think Elder Scrolls 6 is going to do $1 billion. Wow. A lot of confidence in Bethesda games, hey? Wow. This is going to inform so many consumer decisions, whether or not all of these plans are concrete or not. But surely they would have to be concrete plans if it's all been submitted to the FTC. So I'm thinking this could make or break the company. Well, it's in terms of Xbox, not Microsoft.
Fallout 3 Remaster, Indiana Jones, a potential return of Scalebound, theoretically, maybe, and even more. So the most important bits we're going to have to go through here is how they wanted to buy Nintendo. They even had a contact on the inside actually kind of working on making it happen for them. The future for Xbox is all digital and all cloud, although I think we all kind of expected that.
If Xbox bought Nintendo, see, that's when I start to raise concerns about a gaming monopoly. Because there's kind of like the great three, PC aside. You've got Nintendo, you've got PlayStation, you've got Xbox. But if it's just PlayStation and Xbox, and you have everything that Xbox has to offer, plus Nintendo games, wow.
There's new hardware that could change the future of gaming drastically, which is a quick way of saying...
It's not going to be a square anymore. It's going to be a circle. I saw the cylinder on Twitter yesterday.
They might move to ARM. I'll get into it, but that's a very big deal. So we've actually got a glimpse into what they think behind closed
ARM
doors.
technology.
And I remember the last time there's an Xbox leak, they did, haha, here's a funny meme, some social media stuff. They didn't do it this time because this one is very serious. So let's get into the hardware then. Here is the Xbox Series X refresh, which looks, I mean, people have pointed it out online. It looks like that basically trash can design that Apple had for the Mac that no one liked. But realistically here, it's just more internal storage. A lot of like small improvements. This isn't going to be a more powerful console. It's just...
Okay, 4K, Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.2, 6 nanometer die shrink for improved efficiency, reduced PSU power, new low power standby mode, increased use of polycarbonate something, recyclable packaging, $500, 2 terabyte storage. Well, I mean, yeah, games are getting bigger now. I should hope so. USB-C front port with power delivery, more immersive controller. I don't even know what that means. What's an immersive controller? Okay.
Something that it runs a little bit smoother, it runs a little bit cleaner. It's got additional technology, so you've got, you know, I/O updates, Wi-Fi updates, Bluetooth updates, efficiency on power, all that stuff. So this isn't really something you're going to go rush out to get unless you're an extreme Xbox fanboy. It's literally just, hey, it's time for a refresh because why not? Might as well. The other one then is the refresh of the Series S, which of course is basically the same deal here. It's up to a terabyte, same price. You've got all those upgrades. You've got recyclable packaging. You've got low power standby mode, stuff like that, which actually, you know, there's a decent thing to be said for electricity prices recently, where I think actually having a lower power standby mode might almost pay a console back if you have it long enough. They also have a new controller, which is got Xbox Wireless 2 direct to cloud, which is an interesting thing to include in a controller. Bluetooth 5.2. They've got rechargeable, swappable batteries, stuff like that. New modular thumbsticks.
Because cloud gaming is the future. So they want a cloud button. Mobile app features. Yeah, see, they're really trying to make Xbox like more than just a gaming console. They're trying to make it like your home entertainment console. So an EU would be $550 probably. Yeah, probably. Sounds about right. Precision haptic feedback. Precision. Haptics double as speakers. Accelerometer, quieter buttons, and thumbsticks. So the controllers are going to be more expensive. That's what I got from this. Lift to wake. Oh, I kind of hate that.
Longevity, build improvements, precision haptic feedback, which is likely not to the same deal as the DualSense, but they're definitely kind of pushing towards the Switch-like HD Rumble in a way, because, I mean, everyone has access to that technology, so why not? And quieter buttons and thumbsticks. So it's basically just, here's a slightly new feature. Here's your launch timeline, where it's like, here you go, here's fiscal year 25, August, then late October in time for holiday. This isn't particularly exciting, but it is like, this is literally their plans, their timings all been released. So Sony and Nintendo get to look at this and go, oh, is that when you're planning to release that? That's interesting. What if we release our PS5 Pro in whatever? Obviously they have their own plans that are going to be kind of stuck in stone, but at the same time they can literally just go, oh, that's your plan. we can market around defeating that. We can make some changes in our messaging ahead of time to preempt what you're going to do and destroy you. We can put heavy sales on stuff like that. The Switch 2, obviously Switch 2 rumored for next year. That's going to be a thing they can...
Yeah, they can definitely make a dent in sales, being able to anticipate this.
Literally go, sorry Xbox, get got. Now the other important thing here is all digital future. None of these have disk drives, which is why they've patented this, which is basically if you get one of the new all digital things and you have a load of like backwards compatible Xbox games, you can at some point you'll be able to get an external disk drive, probably like something that they sell that will authenticate them for you. You just hook it up, which at that point you kind of go, what's the point? But then you realize they can sell that disk drive for something like $40-50 and actually make a little bit extra profit off it. There's also a few other things here, a little like the mobile controller, which looks a
low end mid PC. Your PC's mid, bro. Cloud device, handheld consoles, high end PC, and this one hand controller. So they're trying to do the Nintendo Switch deal, but I think people are already hard stuck with either having a Nintendo Switch or like a Steam Deck. Steam Deck is obviously better. Core Premium Elite, $60, $80, $120. That's my guess. Gaming keyboard and mouse for the Xbox. So now you're going to have this whole struggle of, oh, they're playing with keyboard and mouse, so they're better at the game than I am. Wouldn't that be interesting?
A little like a backbone. There's the one hand controller for if you're playing, you know, a game and for accessibility reasons, of course. Now, the next generation of Xbox, this is something they do not want people to know about at all at this point in time. But here we are. Their vision is to develop a next-generation hybrid game platform capable of leveraging the combined power of the client and cloud to deliver deeper immersion. Remember how that went for Crackdown? I don't know if anyone's going to ever...
Optimized for real-time gameplay, and creators will be able to enable levels of performance beyond the capabilities of the client hardware alone. Well, yeah, that's kind of the point, is people don't want to empty their pockets to buy like a high-end PC. So leveraging the cloud allows people to play high-end games with low-end tech. And I've heard really good things about ARM technology. Big/little CPU cores, co-designed with AMD or licensed AMD IP. Micropolygon rendering optimizations, ML-based super resolution, extensibility, model for faster iteration and innovation.
Deeper immersion. Remember how that went for Crackdown? I don't know if anyone's going to be excited by hearing this, to be completely honest. It's just the same stuff. But then we've got the actual very important stuff here where it's CPU, decisions, investments, ARM64 versus x64 Zen 6. Are they going to swap to ARM? Because you think about Apple's new stuff with the M1, the M2, and so forth, being actually extremely efficient and extremely good ARM devices.
Yeah, ARM is crazy tech. I've been hearing about ARM for the last couple of years. Let's see if we can find a quick breakdown. Explain ARM CPU technology like I'm a 5-year-old. This is what I do all the time. Let's imagine a big toy box. The toy box is like a computer. Now inside this toy box, there are lots of different toys that do different things. There's a toy that can talk, a toy that can move, a toy that can light up, and so on. Each of these toys are like a part of the computer that does a specific job. Now imagine there's a special toy in the box. That's like the boss of all the other toys. It's Woody. This boss tells all the other toys when and how to do their jobs. This boss is like the CPU. ARM CPU technology is a special kind of boss toy. It's designed to be really good at telling other toys what to do in a way that uses less energy and makes less heat. This means you can play with your toy box for longer before you need to change batteries. It won't get too hot if you play with it a lot. Thanks, Edge.
You kind of see a world where maybe x86 and x64 are a little bit on the downturn, and if they can literally go into this, then we could be in for a big shakeup of how consoles work, especially with how consoles work compared to PC, because obviously everyone has an x86 PC. If consoles suddenly end up being ARM and we move away from the consoles or small PCs, then we're going to have a very interesting time. And I'm a little bit concerned about this, I guess, in a way. We'll have to see where it goes, because obviously if we start getting more desktop PCs with ARM stuff, then we might actually be in for a slightly better future. It's just going to be a lot of teething problems to get there. Obviously, I know a lot of viewers are PC gamers, so I think that'll be something to very much look out for, especially when you see what Sony is going to do. Another thing interesting about this is the thin OS, a lacking thin OS for under $99 consumer handheld devices. That'll imply that you're able to get basically a small Xbox phone or a small Xbox dongle or something that'll run a version of the OS and stream your games from the cloud. So they're very much all in on this cloud future. And here's a load of stuff. It's basically the next generation of what they're thinking of. You look at the green stuff, it's established projects, the yellow is research, proof of concept, and the gray is kind of stuff they're thinking about. So you look here, you see game performance, super resolution, deep neural network. That's DLSS3, DLSS2, FSR, stuff like that, where they're just doing neural nets to... I think people are largely happy with how DLSS has turned out, and if FSR had...
So they want to achieve frame rate interpolation, but they don't have any proof of concept. Cloud latency compensation. That's the biggest concern that I have. Because, like, yes, you could leverage the cloud for gaming in such that you don't need a super powerful computer in order to play your games at high fidelity. But what about latency? How far away is that cloud server serving your game to that person's console? Because if it's far enough away, how do you compensate for that? Especially, like, you can't really do competitive games this way, because I think there's always going to be a lack of trust that they're getting the best possible service. I mean, obviously, when you're playing online games, there's no 0 millisecond latency potential, but you got to keep it 50, ideally closer to like 20 to 30 ms.
And that's to... I think people are largely happy with how DLSS has turned out, and if FSR had a better implementation, I think it would be happier. But that's all completely like fine and there. Frame rate interpolation. I don't know if I need to say what I feel about frame rate interpolation, or we'll be here for a little bit, because honestly, as soon as you get into, hey, we'll just invent frames in the middle, then you start to run into input issues theoretically. And that's one of the things people have been worried about with DLSS3. I know the Digital Foundry guys, if I remember correctly, have been largely happy with that and how it's panned out, especially if you're interpolating frames to just, you know, hey, you've got a nice solid 60 FPS. What if we make it look like 120? You're not going to get the input benefit, but at least it's going to like look a little bit smoother, especially if you can combine that with neural net stuff to not have like weird smear frames and stuff. Because I remember looking into this, and I think it was Star Wars The Force Unleashed 1 or 2 had a version of this running many years ago, and it looked really bad at times. So we'll have to see how that kind of pans out, but hopefully it's not that bad. There's also xCloud latency compensation, which is, I guess...
To be fair, that game came out a long time ago. We've come a lot farther with AI assisting with this kind of interpolation in DLSS. So I think it's possible. At the same time, I do worry about the input.
At this point, it's in research. Latency is going to be one of the biggest problems for core gamers, for people who really care about how gameplay feels and
Thank
stuff
you,
like
Mike.
that, getting into cloud gaming, because obviously, of course...
Latency.
You're got 50, 100 ping, and you're on a phone, and you've got this, because obviously you think about ping and you think of playing a multiplayer game, and most of the time you'll see, you know,
we're of the same mindset when it comes to competitive / multiplayer games. How do you make sure people are seeing what's happening according to the server quickly enough? That's hard.
Shooter classic of, you know, getting shot when you're around a wall, and that feels bad, but that's only on the, like, you see everything with like render latency. You don't see it with that added latency. Imagine you're seeing things with that extra latency and your controls are delayed by that much. Imagine playing on a TV that has game mode turned off, but that's...
Like, you press forward on your thumbstick, and sure, within a second you start moving forward, but you can always tell that tiny little bit. You experience the same thing if you try to like stream a game from your PC to like your laptop or something on Steam, for example.
Every single time you play, and possibly even worse. So at least they're thinking about stuff like that. There's also stuff like AI agents. Yeah, the more we get literally better AI in video games, the better. It's hard to really say anything about that. Matchmaking, player ranking, obviously established projects. That's all fine. This is literally just, can we use machine learning to improve all these processes?
The only category they have covered off for sure is the player services, support, safety, and toxicity. We're going to maintain our toxic environment. Obviously, they're trying to prevent that. And personalization and discovery. I don't know what they mean by this.
And as everything here just seems more or less sound. The only thing I'm really concerned about is that frame rate interpolation, because I don't want a world where our frames are fake half the time. Not because I don't believe in like some possible good there. You know how the industry is, right? You know how we go, oh, wouldn't we love 4K? And they go, here's like checkerboarded 4K, and we're going to call it 4K because we don't care if we lie to you half the time. And that's a pretty small deal. But you look at like ray tracing as well, and how we've had so many issues with games released like in this generation with, hey, here's ray tracing that you can't turn off in some cases, or here's the default version is 30 FPS ray tracing, like the Spider-Man, right? Try to play Spider-Man, the Ultimate Spider-Man, the remaster version. Plays like absolute dog if you're playing in quality mode at 30. It barely feels close to 20.
I feel like he said dog and they cut him off. It was a good cut though.
times. It was an awful experience, and they're like, that's fine, ship it. So I'm a little bit concerned on that front, just with how we might end up getting, our game renders at 15. It's fine. Just frame interpolate the rest. Whatever. Those gamers will buy it anyway. That's my fear there. But moving on. This is the stuff that really, when this stuff leaked, I swear I was. Leaks internally tell you an awful lot, because what people say publicly and what people say privately are often very different. I think everyone's that way, but as soon as you see the private stuff, you're a little bit concerned. Because Phil Spencer he's fairly well memed, and I think he's fairly well loved. He does a decent job of standing on stage, talking all gamery. He's got that little game he plays where he teases stuff.
He gives me an impression that he's a really nice guy. During that whole Bloomberg interview, he definitely won some points with me, even though he was giving very politically correct answers. But when it came to Todd, oh my God, Todd. Well, we're really pushing some techie stuff, so you got to just buy a new computer. Get good
on a shelf, and that's all fine, that's great. Everyone kind of thinks he's our guy in a way, but
at some point getting Nintendo would be a career moment, and I honestly believe a good move for both companies. It's taking a long time for Nintendo to see that their future exists off of their own hardware. A long time. That's funny. This email from 2020 discusses several M&A movements from Xbox and Microsoft. Corporate entities at the scale do regularly. In conversations at this time, they bought ZeniMax, Warner Brothers, TikTok did not go through. Oh, Warner Brothers didn't go through either. Buying Valve for access to the Steam storefront. Wow.
Then he turns around in an email and says, it would be a career-defining moment for Microsoft to buy Nintendo, which is obviously you can be concerned with your own career if you want, but it is very much a different face than the one he shows publicly. So he's concerned about his career and wants to get Microsoft.
If Microsoft successfully bought Steam, would they lower the fees of which they take for published games on the store? Because it's Microsoft. So it could go one of two ways. Well, it's the status quo, let's maintain it because we're already there. Or we be the good guys, the saviors, and make the barrier to entry less so that more games appear on Steam rather than their own launcher or other launchers.
Microsoft to buy Nintendo because that will be a good move for both companies. He ends this really long email with, it's just taking a long time for Nintendo to see that their future exists off their own hardware. A long time, 4 dots, and one of those smiley faces with the hyphen for a nose in the middle, which is the sign of a psychopath. And that kind of goes to show exactly what's going on here, right? It's literally just, oh, well.
Which is the sign of a psychopath. I like Mike. He's always very blunt.
The Switch is hyper successful. Why is that? Don't care. Our hardware is better because it goes faster. You know, the whole emulation debate around Switch, people will be happier if it is literally, okay, you can play your games, your Switch games, your beautiful games that you've made, do incredible Nintendo games, but they run better? Sure, that's fine, that's great. But it seems a little bit ignorant of why the Switch works for so many people and how good it is as a product. It's very, very American cultural imperialism, if I'm going to be brutally honest with you. But there's other things in the email that I thought were interesting, because they obviously were
Take on W. Damn right.
Talking about ZeniMax, which then that went through because this is pre-COVID time. This is a long time ago. They wanted to buy Warner Brothers Interactive, which they did not. Mostly, it seems, because Warner Brothers have a tight grip on their IP, and they would have to license it out instead of owning it, which is pretty much in an industry where you want to buy things for IP and for projects. Not getting IP is a deal breaker. And then TikTok, which obviously didn't go through. But they were talking about Nintendo because they're the prime asset for us in gaming. And everyone knows that. They also said they wanted to buy Valve so they could get access to Steam. So you can kind of think of it tells a story of exactly what they're thinking. What if we just buy these people and all their stuff is ours? What if we just do that? That's like a thing we can do. What if we just walk up to Gabe and say, hello Gabe, how much for Valve? And then we can have complete access to Steam and that'll be our platform and to hell with everyone else. What if we just consolidate? If we buy all of gaming will be all of us and people will have nowhere to go. You can see that that's very much how they feel about things. There was one last thing about Nintendo I wanted to say because it showed me how they feel and think a lot. Because in the email, Phil was talking that he had I think it was an ex-Microsoft board of directors member who was buying up shares in Nintendo. And I think it was their company was doing it. And Phil said he was in touch with them and keep in contact because they wanted to see if maybe...
That's kind of problematic, isn't it? Ex-board of directors from Xbox bought up a bunch of Nintendo shares because they know that Microsoft's trying to make this move. Oh boy.
They could use that to gain leverage in Nintendo board of directors. Obviously, you know, hey, if our friend buys shares in the company we want, then, of course, then we can get them to let us in. We can have a man on the inside in the board of directors who actually gets to say, hey everyone, I think Microsoft buying Nintendo is a great idea, and kind of push that leverage. Now, there's basically no chance it would happen. And that was a conversation that happened. Was it 2001, I think? It was a very long time ago anyway,
Wow.
where Xbox, back in the original
Yeah, that long ago, not as significant.
days, were also considering a purchase in Nintendo, and Nintendo laughed them out of the room. So I think Phil maybe needs to do a little bit of history lesson on that front. But it does show exactly how they're thinking about it. And now we get to talk about games and studios, because Phil said that Xbox doesn't close studios based on their profit and loss. Okay, sure. He went and said that
They don't close studios based on profit and loss. In response to a questioning from a partner, software architect at Microsoft, one reasonably asking what happens to all the companies they've just bought if things don't go so well in terms of releases. Yeah, they'll have to like dissolve or consolidate resources. Probably a lot of like mergers of studios under a unified name, one studio moving in with another. It makes me think of that Silicon Valley episode where they bought like these two companies to bolster their staff and then just force them to work together. But there was still this segregation based on the work culture. They've only done it when either from leadership leaving, Lionhead as an example, or team just losing its passion, Ensemble as an example, Fable and Age of Empires / Halo Wars.
it's when leadership leaves, when like Lionhead, as an example, the Fable team, that fell apart because leadership left, and then Ensemble, who lost their passion, and that was gone. So that's the Age of Empires and Halo Wars team. So it's fascinating that he goes, it's not about profit and loss. And then you go, well, why did the leaders leave? Was it because you were pushing them for profit and loss? Interesting, maybe. You know, why did they lose their passion? Was it because you were creatively controlling them and throwing away their ideas and making them work like with unrealistic expectations? Maybe.
That's the scary thing about game development. When you're working for one of these big companies, when you're in one of these smaller development studios and you get bought out, how things change in terms of the culture and expectations. Game development used to be so cool to me, and now it's just scary.
So there's a little bit of a think one step further, Phil, on this front. Though it was interesting because he was talking to one of his co-workers, and they basically had like a good back and forth about it. So it's not all terrible, but it's a little bit weird. And now there's something that was really fascinating too, because you know Baldur's Gate 3, right? I think you may have heard of it.
Oh, I've heard of it. Oh, I know it.
This is a little niche RPG that a few people have played. They called it a second run Stadia PC RPG that they didn't need to care about bringing to Game Pass.
What? The Verge reporting a clear sign that sometimes Microsoft doesn't get it right. Wow. And you know what that comes down to? That's the stereotype of like, oh, this is just a turn-based RPG for nerds who are into the D&D niche. No. Even if you haven't played D&D before, even if you've never done turn-based combat games, this game's different. It's a cinematic experience. I know a fair amount of women who are not into D&D who got Baldur's Gate 3 because of Astarion. Yes, darling. There's a reason that he's the front face of the cover.
RPG that they didn't need to care about bringing to Game Pass. Can you imagine that? You imagine looking at Baldur's Gate 3 and going, that's some second-rate bullshit. We don't want that on our platform. That's not worth our effort whatsoever. And then it releases. It's funny because that's not the first time they've done that either, because it happened with Genshin Impact. I remember a story a decent while ago where it came out that obviously Genshin Impact, the Hoyo versus incredible games. You know, you think about gacha if you like, but lots of money, lots of players. People are very, very happy with that whole like ecosystem of games. So that's on PlayStation exclusively, as obviously as well as PC and mobile stuff. But the console exclusivity for that is PlayStation and Sony. Xbox actually turned them down, or something similar. I believe it was MiHoYo showed up to Xbox and we're like talking to them about Genshin Impact, and Microsoft were like, nah, it's not really for us, thank you. And
it's not really something you'd picture on Xbox, but at the same time, can you imagine how well this game would do on Xbox? The microtransaction aspect alone.
Apparently, internally, they have been kicking themselves ever since, and that's why there's been a big push towards a lot of Game Pass going, get us everything you possibly can, because they're just so worried about missing out again. And they've literally done it again, exactly with Baldur's Gate 3. And that must be so fascinating. But for some good news on their games, we do have ZeniMax's management forecast. And keep in mind, these dates here are pre-COVID, and everything has been kicked down the road by about 2 years here. So you look at stuff here and you see, okay, well, there's
Elder Scrolls 6, Fallout 3 Remaster. How many people want a Fallout 3 Remaster? It is a good game, but does it need a remastering? Haven't people technically remastered it within the modding community? And the people who would be interested in that are just playing on PC? Hard to say. Elder Scrolls Online expansion, typical. Dishonored 3. And these are their anticipated revenues in millions. So they think Elder Scrolls 6 is going to do $1 billion? Wow. A lot of confidence in Bethesda games, hey?
There's Doom Eternal, right? Okay, that's out. Fallout, Wastelanders, Elder Scrolls Online, Deathloop, etc., etc. Project Hibiki here, obviously that is Hi-Fi Rush. That released in 2023, so you can see the 2-year gap here between 21 Hibiki releasing then. We've got Indiana Jones game, which if we add 2 years to everything is due out next year. An Oblivion remaster due out next year. Interesting that they haven't said anything about that whatsoever. Another, more.
I didn't even see that in the list. Sky Oblivion is coming out. Has there just been so much reception of that Skyrim mod that Microsoft is like, let's capitalize this and make our own? Damn, that's kind of cruel.
Or Elder Scrolls Online, Starfield DLC, which is interesting to see that that's actually solidly planned. I think no one would have not expected it, but we're likely going to see that in a year or so. Then there's Doom Year Zero and DLC for it, which is an entirely new Doom project that we don't know anything about. That's just, here it is. That's good to know, actually. Frustrating for the team that it leaked. There's Project Kestrel, which is apparently a project that they're going to have a lot of engine development and future-facing stuff on. That might be a new IP, which is interesting. There's Project Platinum, which I think people will see. Project Platinum! Xbox! Scalebound! Let's go! This is ZeniMax. It's likely not scalebound. No one has any idea what Project Platinum could feasibly be. And then Elder Scrolls 6, which obviously fiscal year 24, 26. So we're still 3 years away at least from seeing Elder Scrolls 6, which isn't going to surprise anyone. There's the expansion for Project Kestrel, which goes, oh yeah, it's clearly going to be an MMO. There's a licensed IP game, which I'm not quite sure we know what that is. There's a Fallout 3 remaster. So over the next 3 years, we're going to see an Oblivion remaster and a Fallout 3 remaster, which is, I think, pretty much good news for anyone who likes Bethesda games. Interestingly enough, there's also a Ghostwire Tokyo sequel on the go, which is interesting because that game was received reasonably well, and I'll be happy to see if they can make something substantially better, but without the original creative director, it's going to be interesting. Then Dishonored 3. Thank God for that. Thank God. Obviously,
This is like some juicy news. I'm even more eager to see the response from Xbox as a result of this.
Critical success of Deathloop clearly gave them enough room to continue working on that, even though it is a few years out. So there we have it. That is a substantial leak of basically everything that Xbox are planning. Obviously, we didn't get to see, unfortunately for, I think, us, fortunately for the teams at Xbox and stuff, we didn't get to see a list of what games they're releasing internally, which is honestly probably a net gain because there's certain things that go so wrong.
Juicy.
The whole list gets leaked and things will go completely backwards. But generally, this is fascinating that we've got such a comprehensive plan leaked. Whoever was involved in this is going to get seriously in trouble. Like, this is, as far as punishment goes, there's going to be serious punishment for whoever ended up involved in this or whatever mistake was made. But it is just kind of nothing surprising, right? Outside of a couple of games and the potential of them swapping to ARM for the next console, there's nothing particularly surprising here because it's just
nothing particularly surprising. I always knew Xbox was pushing for cloud gaming, so I'm really curious to see how they implement a solution for just pure latency so that it feels almost like playing an online game locally. If you can get the milliseconds low enough, it's a confusing time for gaming as the future approaches. And then they're just refreshing the consoles because they don't want to keep making consoles so good that you might as well just buy a PC, which is why they're leveraging cloud gaming in the first place. But I mean, we've already been saying how the Game Pass is of great value if you're already invested in the Xbox ecosystem. This only bodes well for further great value of that.
Just Xbox doing what Xbox does. They're going to, at all costs, push towards the cloud. They're going to push towards digital. They want you to be playing your Xbox games and your Halo Infinite 2 or whatever else. They want you to be doing that on your phone because they think that's the future, which is fascinating because that's what's happened recently with the iPhone 15 Pro being called the best games console ever by Apple, when they used the whole, like, the best, because I think the thing with the phone camera was the best camera you have is the camera that is on you, it's on your person now when you need to take a photo, you know, as opposed to carrying a camera everywhere, etc. And they're kind of going for that angle with a game console, and that's depressing to, I think, a lot of us, because we don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear, hey, sorry, you like that big sitting on the sofa or sitting at your PC, that big immersive experience. No, you're going to play video games on the bus, loser. You're going to play video games in the back of your Uber. You're going to be on the plane playing your games. You're going to be sitting on a park bench outside playing your massive immersive RPG, or your second-rate Stadia PC RPG, as it were. You're going to be playing that, and it's going to be...
Wow, I can tell Mike really likes Baldur's Gate 3 as well, as much as I do, because he's quite butthurt by that comment. I'm a little bit butthurt myself. Second-rate Stadia RPG. Damn, that's a bad take.
To be on a phone that's like, what, 6-7 inches in diameter, and you're going to have this like really tiny little crunchy handheld. And I think there's definitely place for mobile games, for sure. And this, it just feels frustrating that that's the whole Xbox plan, is combined power of the client and cloud, deliver deeper immersion, entirely new class of game experiences, optimized for creators. I don't want a game console that doesn't run my game if it's not connected to the internet. No one wants that. Even you consider any of the latency stuff involved in that. Even
they really are coming full circle. The original proposal they had where you always had to be connected to the internet, now they're designing technology to justify that kind of experience, because you won't be able to leverage the power of the cloud and thus play your cloud-based games unless you're connected to the internet. So what else are they going to be doing while you're connected to the internet? Little tinfoil hat speculation.
Even if they architect a good solution, I think a lot of us would rather them just focus on making good games. And that's why the purchase of Nintendo talk here really kind of tilted me, because they're saying it's taking a long time for Nintendo to see their future exists off their own hardware. Look at the Switch sales and tell me that's true. Look at how many people own a Switch, love it to pieces, play games that don't run that well, that don't even look that great, and have the time of their lives. You look at that and you see, well, that obviously there are downsides to that for like a lot of us who are,
there was a lot of complaints about that Pokemon game where it was just mountains in the distance, but otherwise a fairly vast and barren looking land. I was personally turned off by it. The ability to render more on screen certainly is one argument about improving the hardware. I feel like Nintendo should just do that themselves. I don't think it means moving to Xbox.
Used to PC gaming and great experience, but at least they stop and remember that the games are supposed to be good. Whereas Xbox's entire approach is so platform based, so hardware based, so everything based, and platforms are important, hardware's important. It's just not as important as a gaming experience. And there's almost nothing in any of these leaks that imply that Xbox, obviously this isn't comprehensive, this isn't everything they're talking about and stuff, but everything we've seen and noticed so far is just they're not focused on building world-class quality and experiences based off what's good game design or what's fun for people. It's like them looking at Baldur's Gate 3 and not seeing the potential there. A second run Stadia PC.
Arguably unlimited potential of what Baldur's Gate 3 is.
PC RPG, they didn't need to care about it. It's not the future we want, right? This is the future of Xbox, and it's not one I think we're particularly excited by in any meaningful capacity. Even you look at the Oblivion remaster, you look at the Fallout 3 remaster, those are going to be great. Those are going to sell really well. I think people love them. But at the same time, man, make some new games. And maybe this will all go away once Xbox's first party.
Make some new games, because Bethesda games have modders to make them better. They don't need remasters. They have masters at work remastering it for you so that it can be handed to the people for free. Stop trying to make money off that.
Actually get their games out the door. That seems to be the one thing they kind of are doing wrong. And it's funny then when you go and you see what Phil talks about when it's closing, studio closures and stuff like that. It's just, we've bought all these. Will it all go well? Will this... Because you look at what happened to Embracer, right? Embracer bought so many studios. And obviously they immediately... They got one deal. It was a big deal, to be fair. One deal cut out from beneath them, and suddenly all those games had to go. All those studios are having to go. And it's this consolidation, this consistent idea of if we buy more and be bigger, then we're going to win. And it seems to miss the point. Compared to what we've been talking about recently, we've been talking about Unity in much the same breath, where they're just going, to hell with people. We'll just take money from them. Experience of customers? Nah, to hell. What's that? We're going to have to figure out a way to have all of our Unity installs phone home. Well, that sounds bad for the customer. who gives a shit? Who cares about the end user? And there's a lot of it seems to be from that angle here. And maybe I'm reading a lot into a couple of leaks, but it is just, here's the ZeniMax games. That's
Yeah, but perception of the consumer matters. And that is the consumer perception right now. F the consumer. That sucks. That's a bad business plan. You can't make your business plan about profit and loss anymore because markets are so saturated, and consumers, you could argue consumers aren't the smartest, but they're smarter. You need to operate earning good faith first, profit after. But good faith has to come first, because if people don't trust your brand, there's no profit.
I've talked enough about Xbox today. What do you think about all of this? What do you like? Do you see this and think kind of what I was talking about, or is it just more business as usual? Are you happy enough for them to just release pretty decent games every now and again?
Thinking like an economist.
Because I think all of this, you think about opportunity cost, you think about effort, you think about like the profitability and stuff. If they are putting a lot of effort into the mobile controller and all of their mobile stuff, etc., if that pays well, that's fine. But it does need to go back into the games. That's the one thing that needs to happen, is this investment needs to turn around and go back into the actual experiences, the actual reasons that we literally play video games in the first place. If they can do that, all this stuff's important. You look at them going, here's the all digital Brooklyn. It's a big cylinder, and you'll give us extra money for an external disk drive to play your old games. That just doesn't quite seem right to me. And with that, on a surprisingly dour note for usual, I think I will see you tomorrow for more news, where we'll be talking about, believe it or not, more developments with Unity, because
I've been calling him Mike this whole time. Sorry, Matt, but you are a really great host, Matt. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you, Matt. Matt. Got it. The new Xbox redesign. Yeah, it's a cylinder with no disk drive, because they want to sell you the disk drive separately if you want to play your old games. They're trying to force you to cloud-based gaming because they think that's the future. And, you know, nobody needs to sit down at their couch. They want you to play on the phone. Everywhere you go, you can access your games. They'll figure out the latency thing later, I guess. We'll see. Funny, I scrolled Game Pass for an hour and just fell asleep. You don't think there's good value there? I remember when I was in Game Pass, they had Halo Infinite, but then they were removing it after a certain time. Those kinds of things feel bad. Just continuously add to it and not take away, because they're just giving you this FOMO and forcing you to play certain titles at certain times, and that feels bad. It feels like I'm paying for not having control. There's some good titles, but there's a lot of junk. There's Turnover Agreed, dumb, leaving soon. Yeah, I hate that. 4 hours ago, Clear's Throat, using slashes for Clear's Throat. Hello, fellow kids. Here's something else. I can't play some of those titles regardless. Not available to, on Xbox One, really? Yeah, so they're trying to use Game Pass as leverage to make you upgrade. That kind of sucks. Gotham Knights. A lot more games in general are transitioning away from Xbox One 2. Feels bad, man.